Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Mahdi Tijani back with you. Becoming a step parent. I was requested to make a video about becoming a stepfather specifically because that's the most likely scenario in terms of becoming a step parent, and what that involves, and also how can we reconcile this, if you can reconcile it at all, with the red pill, which is vehemently opposed to becoming a cuck, which simply means raising another man's child. That's the bottom line. Spending your time, energy, resources into raising another man's child. So I'm going to go into that, and I'm also going to go into the consequences, or I should say the pitfalls that you have to watch out for if you do become a step parent, because I am a step parent myself. I'm a stepfather to my wife's children. My wife's a widow. Her husband died nearly 10 years ago now and left behind 3 children. And I'm going to make a distinction as well, and I'll explain, as I've explained them in videos in the past, but I'll explain them again, between divorcees and widows, the difference between the two in terms of their pair bonding abilities, which I've gone over in the past. So, I've got some notes here that I'm going to frequently refer to, and I'll try and just reel them off. Firstly and foremostly, let's address this statement. It's sunnah to marry divorcees. I took a video a while back addressing this, and I'll add these videos at the end. When we say it's sunnah to marry divorcees, we must make a distinction between it's a sunnah and it's the sunnah. And to summarize quickly, there is a distinction. For example, it is a sunnah of the Messenger of Allah to marry 11 women at once. It is a sunnah of the Messenger of Allah to pray the entire night. It is a sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to fast consecutive day and night. That was his sunnah. But it is not the sunnah. As you know, a man can have a maximum of 4 wives, not 11 wives. We are prohibited from praying the entire night, and we are prohibited from fasting consecutive day and night. So although it was a sunnah, it is not the sunnah. So when you say that, oh, the Prophet ﷺ married divorcees, therefore it's the sunnah. Be careful. Be careful, because we have to make this distinction between a sunnah and the sunnah. Now, if you want to say it's the sunnah, meaning there is a specific reward attached to it, it's not prohibited, and there's a specific reward attached to the action, then we need to bring a proof. We need to bring a proof. There is a proof in the hadith. You can find it in Bukhari. I cannot remember the hadith word for word verbatim. I just remember that it's referenced in Bukhari, of how the Messenger of Allah mentioned that he will be like this with the one who takes care of the orphan child in Jannah. And he also mentioned about the fadl, the reward, the ajr involved in taking care of the widow. So there is a specific hadith attached to this. Okay, so we've got that. The question now arises, is there a specific hadith or mention or ayah, verse in the Quran attached to the virtues or the recommendation for a Muslim man to marry a divorcee? I can tell you emphatically, no, there is not. There is not a hadith or ayah in the Quran which makes a specific mention to the virtues of a man marrying a divorcee woman and taking on her children as well. I cannot find anything. If you have anything on this, put it in the comments box. Not one ayah in the Quran, not one hadith. So, when we say it's the sunnah to marry divorcees, the impression that men get is that there's additional ajr involved. Be careful, because there is no additional ajr involved. It is not the sunnah like it is the sunnah to take care of the orphan child or to take care of the widow. There's a distinction. Now, women like to use this, especially, of course, so that they can make themselves, divorcee women that is, so that they can make themselves more desirable prospects to men. Oh, brother, it's the sunnah to marry divorcees, because she doesn't want to have to face up to the consequences of her actions. Typically, women trigger most divorces, end most marriages for trivial reasons, nothing to do with domestic violence or anything like that. The most commonly cited reasons as to why women end divorces is disenchantment. She became disenchanted with her husband for whatever reason. So she decided to pull the plug. But now she wants to get married again, and she doesn't want to be held accountable for the actions or the consequences of her actions. And she wants to be taken on again, obviously, naturally. Who wants to remain single for the rest of their life? So she tries to throw out statements like this, like it's the sunnah. No, sister. It's not the Sunnah. Don't try and mislead us here. Okay, so now we've established that side. Now, let's go on to the more practical things. If you're going to take on a divorcee sister, aside from her pair bonding issues that you're going to have to face, especially if she's been divorced multiple times, you can forget her. She's written off. She's a complete write-off. I say it right here. If the sister has been divorced multiple times, she's a write-off. Don't mess with her. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, but Mahdi, how can you say that? If everyone adopted this mentality, then who's going to be there for the sister who's been divorced 5 times? I say to you this, my brother who's thinking that in his head. There will always be someone willing to burn their hand for you. Don't let that be you. There will always be another sucker willing to burn his hand for you. Don't let that sucker be you. Okay? Right. Now, let's say you find a sister, you marry her. I married my wife, she's a widow. And when I married my wife, she was my 3rd wife at the time. So I already had 2 wives, she was my 3rd wife. And now I've taken on her children as well. Let's address some fundamental, very important issues, that uncomfortable issues that a lot of people don't want to talk about. Firstly and foremostly, I believe you can find this stat cited in The Boy Crisis by Dr. Will Farrell. And he mentions that the incidence of sexual misconduct, shall we call it, because I don't want the word to get censored on YouTube, grape for want of a better word, is 100 times more likely to happen in a step household, a household where there is a step parent, than in a regular nuclear home. This makes perfect sense. If stepfather comes in and the mum that he's married has daughters, there is no biological tie between them. As far as they're concerned, if he never married mum and those girls grew up, he could have married the girls. So there's no biological tie between stepdad and stepdaughters. This presents a quandary, because if the stepdad harbors some type of sickness in his heart, or he wants to act upon some type of impulse, this puts the girls at risk. They are at high risk of being abused by him. Or it could even be consensual, by the way. Sometimes the girls, for whatever reason, fall in love with the stepdad in that way. And that this might sound crazy to you, but this stuff happens. That's why we're talking about it. Because there's no biological tie between them. Now, of course, if they're minors, if they're kids, then it's on the dad. But if they're older, like they're grown, late teens, then she's a woman. She's a woman. There's no difference. So you have to bear this in mind. You have to bear this in mind, and you have to be on guard. I even know of one father who was wrongly accused of grape, I'm going to call it grape, by his stepdaughter. And it took like 2 or 3 years for him to be cleared of this accusation. He was actually wrongfully accused, and it later transpired that the girl was lying for attention. She just wanted attention. But he had to go through hell during that time. That's not fun. You have to bear that in mind. As a stepfather, if you're going to take on a widow, I do not recommend taking on divorcees with their children. If you're going to take on a widow, bear that in mind. Bear that in mind. Now, why did I say I do not recommend taking on divorcees with their children? Well, very simple. She's a divorcee. She's got a husband. Send the kids back to their father. Tell her, you want to marry me? Okay, no problem. Send the kids back to their dad. That is the Sunnah anyway. It is from the Sunnah, that if a woman gets married again, the husband has the right to ask for his children, especially his daughters, because they're at high risk. If she refuses, say, okay, no problem, ma'as salama. You see, a lot of sisters want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to pull the plug on their marriages, they want to keep their kids, they want to get married again, and they don't want to send the kids back to their father. It doesn't work like that, sister. I'm sorry, it doesn't work like that. You're going to have to start making some choices here. If you're a divorcee woman, you've gotten divorced for whatever reason, I don't care what the reason is, send the kids back to their father if you want to get married again. And if you don't want to send the kids back to their father, don't get married again. Don't put your daughters at that risk, and don't expect another man to come and be your knight in shining armor. Don't do it. And to the brothers, I say to you, stay far away from divorcee sisters who refuse to send their kids back to their father. Why do I say that? Because if you marry her and then you have kids with her, and then for whatever reason you get a divorce, and remember, divorce rates are higher on the second marriage than they were on the first. So if she got divorced the first time around, it's more likely that you and her will get divorced the second time. So now you've married this sister, you've had a kid with her, and now you've gone your separate ways. You've gotten divorced because that's the most likely thing that's going to happen. What do you think she's going to do with your child? Think. Don't be a donut. If she goes on and gets married again for the third time, which is perfectly possible, she's going to keep the kid. She's not going to give the kid to you. Why? Because past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. She didn't give her first set of kids to the father. Why the hell would she give them to you? Don't be a donut. Don't be a sucker. Let someone else burn their hand. Don't let that person be you. And again, I make a distinction for the widows because the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made a distinction for them. And it's not their fault. Her husband died, for crying out loud. It's not her fault. Not to mention, as I have mentioned in the past, the difference in pair bonding abilities between a divorcee and a widow. It's like between the heavens and the earth. If you don't believe me, watch a program on Netflix called The Single Wives and pay attention to the pair bonding ability of the widow versus the 2 times divorcee. Complete, like, polarizing contrast. North and South Pole. Totally polarizing. Widows, in my experience, have no problem in pair bonding. None at all. Divorcees, huge problems. Huge problems because the relationship ended on a sour note when it comes to divorce. And women are greatly affected by multiple sexual or intimate partners. And especially when that relationship comes to an end, it breaks something inside of them, man. It literally breaks something inside of them that makes it very difficult for them to pair bond the next time around. Widows, not the case. Because the relationship didn't end on a sour note. It ended on a tragic note, which presents its own set of problems. My wife suffers from anxiety. She becomes anxious. Like, for example, I remember once we were traveling to the beach and the car had a low roof and she started like palpating and breathing fast and heavy. She's like, I need a moment. I can't do this. I said to her, when did this all start? She said to me, after my husband died. After my husband died, I started suffering from these panic attacks, random panic attacks, anxiety attacks. No idea what the trigger is. I'm sure there's something to it. But the point is, the trauma was triggered after her husband died. Rahimahullah. So what's my point here? My point here is this. Both types of women are broken, but one of them is broken in a different way to the other. The widow is not broken in the same way as the divorcee is. Okay, now back to the stepchildren. We've mentioned that the incidence of sexual misconduct, rape, those types of things are infinitely higher in households that have step parents, 100 times higher. If I'm not mistaken, you can find these stats in Will Farrell's book, The Boy Crisis, a fantastic book to read. What else is there? Another thing you're going to have to bear in mind, to those brothers who maybe are already married to a sister who is a divorcee and you're with her kids, you're going to have to bear in mind, whether she's a divorcee or a widow, the kids are never yours. I can't emphasize this enough. The kids are not yours. It doesn't matter which way you want to wash it. It doesn't matter how she wants to sell it to you. Oh, you're their real father. You know, you're the dad you're not the stepdad. You're the dad who stepped up. Nonsense. Twaddle. The kids will never be yours. They will never be yours. They will never share that tie with you. And as a result of that, their loyalty towards you and that allegiance will never be as strong as it is with your own children. So bear that in mind. Because I was once married a few years ago, to a divorcee sister. And I developed a very close relationship with her children. And after we got divorced, I have no rights to see the kids. None at all. You have no rights as a man to continue seeing her children. They're not yours. None at all. None whatsoever. And that is heartbreaking. Believe me, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking not just for you, but it's heartbreaking for them as well. There is no tie of kinship. No tie of kinship. So always bear that in mind, that you know what? If you're in that role right now, they're not your kids. They're not your kids. And you have to understand that harsh reality. You have to make peace with that harsh reality. Don't fool yourself, and definitely don't allow yourself to be fooled. And if you're a brother considering marrying a divorcee with kids, I tell you, don't do it. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. The only exception I will make is for widows. Why? Because the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made a clear distinction for them. Divorcees with kids, Tell her to send the kids back to their dad. Tell her to do that. If she refuses, that's on her. That's her problem. That is absolutely her problem. If she refuses to send the kids back to their father, that is her problem. Move on. Find another sister. Plenty more fish in the sea. Okay. Authority issues. Now, personally, I've never experienced this, I have to say, but I have heard from many men that they struggle to implement authority with their stepchildren because mum doesn't allow it. Period. Mum doesn't allow stepfather to be the father. And for obvious reasons, because he's not the dad. And this is where the proof is in the pudding. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. Always. Look to the actions. Yes, you're their real dad. You're not the stepdad. You're the dad who stepped up. But then she prevents you from taking some type of authoritative measures with the kids. Maybe implementing some type of consequences of some sort for their bad behavior. Well, basically you've got, like Rich Cooper says, you've got all the responsibility and none of the authority. That's a terrible position to be in. Absolutely terrible position to be in. So bear that in mind again as well. Myself personally, I have not experienced this. I have always had total authority over the stepchildren that I've dealt with, as I do right now as well. Complete authority. And my wife is very submissive in that regard. So I've never had an issue with that. But the exception doesn't make the rule. The exception doesn't make the rule. What else have we got here? Oh, okay. Now, I don't have any evidence for this, and I'm just going to repeat what I heard from Elliot Hulse, but it kind of makes a lot of sense. Firstly and foremostly, there is evidence for what I'm about to say, and that is girls who are raised in a household without a father enter puberty or start their physical development much earlier than the regular girl. They start their physical development much earlier than a girl who's raised with her dad. Why is that? Well, it's fascinating. Once you hear this reason, it's absolutely fascinating. Once a father is removed from the household, the father is the protector of the household. He protects the family from any harm. That's his primary role. His primary role is to put his life on the line if the call arises. If the need arises, dad's primary role is to sacrifice his life so that his wife and kids can continue to survive. That's his primary role. And when you take it down, you strip it down to its bare bones, that is what the primary role of a father is. To protect his family to the point where if he needs to sacrifice his life, so be it. Now, when a father is removed, be it through divorce or be it through because father died, the daughters enter their physical development quicker. Their breasts grow and they become looking like women much younger than a girl who has her father. Why? The reason why, and it's amazing, is that the body recognizes that the main protector is no longer here. Therefore, we need to find a new protector. How are we going to do that? By developing into a woman so that we can sexually attract a man who will take us on and protect us. How incredible is that? Absolutely amazing. When I first heard this, it blew my mind. And this is not the Elliot Hulse part. I'll get to that in a second. It blew my mind. But it makes perfect sense that when a girl loses her father, the body instinctively realizes and recognizes that they are at a risk of some sort. Even if it's not true, especially living in the West today, this is probably not true. But if you were to go back to our hunter-gatherer days, this would absolutely be true. So the body develops, the breasts grow, and the thighs become meaty and so on. Why? So that they can, that girl, whether she recognizes it or not, and she almost definitely doesn't recognize it, the body is trying to attract another male suitor to take care of her, to sexually attract her so that he will pair with her and take care of her and protect her. Now, Elliot Hulse said something, and I don't know if this is true or not, but he said that when a stepfather enters the fray, enters the household, the exact same thing happens, but for different reasons. And I will cite it anyway, and I have no idea if there's any evidence for it, but I'm going to put it out there for you to benefit from. And then you can have a look it up afterwards. And what he said was, when a stepfather enters the household, a girl enters puberty quicker. Why? because the girl's body recognizes this strange man is not my dad. He's not my real father. Therefore, I can potentially be sexually active with him. And I know that sounds crude, and I know you may be like, oh, that's disgusting. How can you say that? No, frank discussion. And I'm going to put it out there because I see the logic in it. It's quite logical. There is no blood tie between stepdaughter and stepfather. Like I said, as far as they're concerned, if another 10 years had passed, this guy could have married this girl. And there would have been nothing wrong with it. So what he said was, Elliot Hulse, is that when stepdad enters the household, the girl, the daughter, the stepdaughter, enters puberty quicker. Why? Because the body, it recognizes there's a strange man here that we can be sexually active with. Whether there's any truth to this or not, I don't know. But bear it in mind. To the ladies watching, to the sisters watching, protect your daughters. Bear this in mind. I strongly encourage you. Send your children back to their father if you're a divorcee and their father's still around. And don't tell me he's a bum, he's this, he's that, he's the other. You chose to pair with him. You chose to have kids with him, especially if you had multiple kids with him. I love it when a sister says to me, oh, he's an abuser. And I was like, really? When did that start? She's like, oh, 6 months into the marriage. I'm like, 6 months into the marriage? You've got 3 kids. I bumped into a woman like that just the other day. She stopped me in the street. She's like, I recognize you from TikTok. You got 3 kids. So he started abusing you 6 months into the marriage, but you continued to have more and more kids with him. What does that say about you? What does that say about you? Send the kids back to their father. Better for them to go back to their father than for you to put them at risk of another man coming in and abusing them. That's much worse. And remember, incidents of sexual misconduct in step households are up to 100 times higher. 100 times higher than in regular nuclear homes for obvious reasons. A father is not sexually attracted to his daughter. That's obvious. So bear that in mind. What else have I got here? All right. I mean, in conclusion, personally myself, I would not marry, because I intend on marrying again, but I would not marry a sister who has children, widow or not. Widow or not. Because there's a lot of struggles involved in raising stepchildren. It's not easy. It's not easy. You know, like, you're constantly reminding yourself in the back of your mind that these kids could turn around on me one day and just say, you know what? Thanks for the ride. It was nice knowing you. And that's really, it's a depressing thought. But I'm not even going to cap. It's a depressing thought. Because you love them a lot. You do love them a lot. You can't help it. But you have to always bear in the back of your mind that is a reality. That's a possibility. It's a possibility, because the truth is they have no tie to you. There is no blood tie to you. There is no obligation in the sight of Allah for them to maintain contact or communication with you. That's the reality. So personally, me, I wouldn't marry a sister again who has children. Period. Period. But if you do decide to do it, the only type of sister that I would consider taking on, or that I would recommend you to consider taking on, is a widow. Because they don't have a father to return to. If you're going to marry a divorcee who has children, fine. Make sure she sends the kids back to their dad, or don't bother with her at all. If you found value in the video, share this. Share this with someone who's either currently a stepdad or is considering becoming a stepfather. Because for the most part, I don't recommend it at all, with the exception of taking on widows and her orphan children. Hit the like, make sure you subscribe to the channel as well, and I'll catch you on the next one, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.